Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula for simonsastamp.com and thank you for joining me today. I love when I'm able to use my stamp sets over and over again to create various projects using them. Today I decided I would use one stamp set, lots of hearts, and would create several quick and easy to mass-produce cards. I went with Love and Hugs theme today as I think these type of cards are great to make and give around Valentine's Day or any day really. We don't need a reason to say we love somebody, and giving them a card like this can quickly remind our friends and family of how much they mean to us. Here's the stamp set I'll be using today. It's very simple, yet oh so versatile. You have the solid and the outline hearts in a number of sizes from very large to super small. To create my cards today, I'm also going to use the Stacking Animals set, and I'll use just the smallest critters from here to add some humor to my projects. Whenever I stamp patterns, I like to practice first and see if my idea works out, if the colors I picked work well together, and so on. So I've already stamped 4 patterns on thin typing paper, and I sketched out my cards, so to speak. So here's my first pattern with the hearts stamped somewhat in a spiral or a circle. My second pattern features hearts that overlap and that are outlined in black. The third pattern is a good example of a very clean and simple stamping, just 2 hearts and a sentiment. And finally, a fourth pattern features hearts coming in from the right and a sentiment and a critter on the left. All of these are super simple in design and very easy to make. So let's go ahead and get started and stamp all of these. Now I did some prep work ahead of time. I pre-cut 4 panels of Neenah Solar White paper. I cut them to 4 by 5¼ inches, and this is where I'll be doing my stamping. I also created gray card bases. I pre-cut fun foam to add dimension, and I heat embossed sentiments, and I'll show you all of that later on in my video. I decided to use the same colors of ink to stamp all 4 of my patterns, and I even assigned each heart size its own color. I find this to be easier for me and less time consuming. I don't have to clean my stamps in between colors, and therefore my stamping goes a little bit faster. Before we move on to stamping, I wanted to explain how I picked the hearts for my patterns today. So I started with the largest one, then skipped the next one, then picked the third heart, then again skipped the next size, and again picked the next one after that, the 5th one. This way I ended up having some visible difference in size, and my hearts did not look all almost the same in size. I hope this makes sense. For my ink colors, I picked Duckling, Melon, Sunkissed, Hollyhock, and Hot Lips. I ended up having a lot of yellow on my projects because I used Duckling for my largest heart. If you'd like to have a more traditional Valentine's Day color combo, I suggest you skip using yellow or use it for the smallest heart and maybe add some other pink and red colors. This color combo worked for me and I really liked the way it turned out, so this is why I started with Duckling for my largest heart. I mentioned I did my stamping on the first pattern somewhat in a spiral fashion or in a circle. Now I didn't dock my heart's sides close to each other, but I left some room there to be able to fit a 5th heart. If you dock the sides of your hearts, you'll only be able to stamp 4 hearts in a cluster, which is fine if this is the look you're going for, but I wanted to have 5 hearts in one cluster. So I followed the same color order for all 4 of my patterns. I started with the largest heart in yellow, duckling color. Next, I stamped the one that was next in size, and I used Melon. Next, I used the next smaller heart in Sunkissed color. Next, I stamped a heart in Hollyhock. And finally, I used Hot Lips for the smallest size heart. For this particular pattern, I also alternated the way I was stamping my heart clusters. So some go clockwise and others go counterclockwise. And I think this just adds more diversity to the pattern. So here's the first pattern done, and you can quickly compare it to my test piece here. I'll be adding additional images later after I stamp all of my patterns today. Moving on to the second pattern, and this is super simple one. I'm first stamping the largest heart in Duckling, and then adding the 3rd size heart using Sunkissed color. I did double stamp these hearts here as I wanted to have more saturated ink color on this particular pattern. Moving on to the third pattern. Again, I'm starting with the largest yellow heart and I'm stamping it 3 times onto my paper. Next, coming in with the second largest heart and stamping it in melon, overlapping the 3 yellow hearts, and also adding 2 solo impressions. The idea here is to overlap each large heart using a smaller heart. So I'm using my third size heart and stamping it in sun-kissed, again overlapping the 2 previously stamped melon hearts and also adding 1 solo heart. And I'm going to continue in this fashion until I stamp all 5 of my hearts. And I'm also going to use the 3 smallest solid hearts from this stamp set, and we'll stamp them using hot lips, filling in the gaps in between my heart clusters. I also want to outline some of the hearts here using black, so I'm going to use the same size outline stamps in black ink, and we'll stamp black outlines over smaller hearts in my cluster. So I'm only outlining smaller hearts in a pair. I'm leaving bigger hearts in each pair as is. And I'm intentionally offsetting my outline for a more playful look. And here you can compare this pattern to my test piece. Moving on to the fourth and my last pattern for this video. Again, I'm starting with the largest heart in duckling and stamping it in 3 sections onto the panel, making sure to leave some white space to the left for a sentiment and a critter. I'm going to continue my stamping using the other 4 heart sizes and the other 4 colors of ink to complete this piece. I'm showing you just 4 patterns here, but the possibilities are truly endless. These hearts can be arranged in so many different ways and stamped in so many different colors of ink, the sky is the limit. You can stamp these going horizontally or vertically or diagonally or arranged into flowers or even big hearts. To be able to use these patterns on cards, I decided to stamp some critters and add some personality to my patterns. I picked a tiny mouse from the Sticked Animals stamp set in Simon's Intense Black ink and stamped it on top of large yellow hearts. The reason I used this particular ink is because I knew I would be doing some Copic coloring later, so I needed to make sure my ink would not bleed. I also added 2 little hearts next to each critter, and I stamped those using my most dark ink color for today, Hot Lips. I did the same thing to finish my second pattern. I stamped a mouse and added 3 little hearts. For my third pattern, I switched to a small bird. I'm still using images from the same Stacked Animals stamp set, and I stamped him 3 times onto my panel. For my fourth pattern, I first stamped a sentiment and it reads, "Sending love and hugs," and I'll be using this sentiment for all of my projects today, and later added a large bird on top of the sentiment. At this point, my stamping was pretty much done, and all I needed to do was to assemble my projects. I mentioned I pre-cut my card bases and fun foam sheets, so I used fun foam to adhere my stamped panels onto card bases I made out of Simon's Smoke cardstock. I'm all out of white fun foam, so I used light blue here. It's not going to be visible under my panels, so it doesn't really matter what color it is. I have a lot of colored fun foam in my stash, so I'm trying to use it all before I order any white. I also heat embossed identical sentiments, sending love and hugs in white embossing powder onto same Smoke cardstock panels, mini panels, and I foam mounted those onto my cards. I forgot to mention that I stamped the same sentiment onto my simplest card. And by the way, this sentiment comes from the Simon's Best Hugs stamp set. It's an older stamp set from Simon. I mentioned I wanted to do some quick Copic coloring, so I used my warm gray markers, the W1, W3, and W5, and colored all of my stamped critters to help them stand out a bit better. Now, I didn't do much shading or blending. I went with a super simple, super fast coloring here. And by the way, this is why I used Smoke cardstock for my sentiments and my card bases. I knew it would match the coloring on my critters. So this is just something to keep in mind. If you'd like to color your critters using some other colors, you can try to match them to the color of cardstock you're using for the card base for a more consistent look. Now, since these cards are so simple, I decided it would be a good idea to add some details. I used a white gel pen and added some hand-drawn details to the hearts. I also came in with a black dimensional pen and highlighted the black eyes of my birds. I didn't highlight anything on the mice as they were just too tiny. Their eyes are just too little to highlight. And lastly, I added a layer of glossy accents to the eyes of my birds to help them pop. I just love doing that lately. So this finishes today's video showing you different patterns you can stamp using just one simple stamp set. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope I was able to inspire you to create. Here's a closer look at these love and hug cards. Be sure to give this idea a try and do tag us on social media so we can take a peek at your projects. You can find the list of supplies I used for these cards down below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet done so. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you next time. Bye!